It is Pokemon Day 2024, and I figured what better way to celebrate the day than to put together a tier list of all of the mainline Pokemon games. Yes, it's time for another tier list. It's been a while since we've done one. I have been waiting for the opportunity to do a Pokemon one, and I figured, hey, Pokemon Day is the perfect day to put it together. Hey everybody, my name is Alex, aka Quality, and welcome back to the channel. Yes, this is very different. Like, I am sitting at my desk. This is weird. I'm filming this with all my streaming equipment. Honestly, I just kind of figured it'd be a little easier to do this for tier lists instead of sitting on the ground and having to do two separate recordings. So we're trying this. I've been a little under the weather too, so I wanted it to be as easy and painless as possible. So yeah, this is not a permanent change. I feel very weird doing this, even though I stream all the time. So it's like, I don't know, but it's weird because I'm not looking at the camera. The camera's up here, but then if I do that, I'm like, hi, what's going on? I'm not used to this, so if it looks weird, I'm sorry. So to give some backstory on my history with Pokemon, I literally grew up with the series. Pokemon came out in 1998, which means it's 28 years old this year, and I was born in 97, so I mean, that's pretty close. I was at the perfect age to be watching the anime as it was coming out. Literally, I'd go to Blockbuster and rent the VHSs when I missed it on TV or something like that, and I grew up with some of the older games of the series as well. I think it's one of the coolest things about Pokemon is whenever there's a new Pokemon game, it's always going to be somebody's first Pokemon game. That's going to be the one that they remember growing up with. And I think nostalgia is such a powerful factor when it comes to our personal Pokemon decision. So keep that in mind as you're watching my list and thinking about it. I think very much so the generations we grew up with probably have a stronger hold on us than some of the newer ones for sure. More so than I think other series, to be honest. And yeah, I truly love this series. Of course, not every entry in the series is equal, not all of them are super good in my opinion, but this list, even though it's very subjective and based on my personal experiences and nostalgia with the series, I'm gonna try to be, positive and negative when I see fit with these games, because I think all of them do have positives, and all of them do have negatives, especially more than others, in my opinion. But again, I'm spoiling. We'll get there. And other disclaimer, I'm only doing the mainline games of the series. I thought about doing a tier list with both the mainline and the spin-offs, but I figured it's really hard to rank mainline Pokemon games versus the spin-off, oh yeah, here's Pokemon Diamond and Pearl versus Pokemon Channel, they're two very, very different things. So I figured let's just stick with the mainline series. And maybe someday, if you're all interested, maybe I'll do a spin-off tier list, because that'd be very interesting in my opinion. And of course, the classic disclaimer with tier lists. I've already said it, but I'm gonna say it again. Remember, this is a list based off of my personal experiences. They might not line up with your experiences, and that is the beautiful thing about sharing opinions and sharing experiences. But without further ado, let's get into the actual tier list. Again, I'm sorry if the camera stuff is weird. I'm trying my best. We're gonna bear through it. So if my face looks weirder than it normally does, I'm sorry, but we're gonna try. So, other thing, we're going through this list in chronological order as well as in pairs. So red and blue together, gold and silver together, etc., etc. The reason I wanted to do this is because aside from some of the third version, there's not a ton of differences between, say, red and blue. There's just not. The main thing is still just Pokemon between the split releases, so I'm treating them as one thing. I will talk about the specific copy that I got of each of these because I don't have both copies for each main series game. We'll get there when we get there, but I did want to explain why it's kind of split in the middle like that. First up, we have Pokemon Red and Blue, the very first two games of the US releases of Pokemon. Pokemon Green is not on here. Yeah, I'm doing US releases because I never had the opportunity to get Pokemon Green, so that is also why. But Red and Blue, the first two, I actually did not have Red and Blue until much later on. I was probably 11 or 12 when I got Red and Blue. I had always just wanted it. It was like a Pokemon dream of mine to have Pokemon Red and Blue, and I wanted them so badly because I felt I wasn't a real Pokemon fan if I didn't have the original games for some reason. And for my birthday that year, I had to have been 12. My grandma, like, surprised me and got me red and blue, but for Pokemon Red, I still don't know how she did this. She got me a complete in-box version of Pokemon Red. And mind you, this was like, what if I said I was 12, then it was like 2009, 2010, I don't know, like, well after the release of the game. And this is a pretty clean box. I mean, like, there are some creases here and stuff. The top doesn't always want to stay down, but, like, the fact of the matter is, it came with all the inserts. The game is actually with my Game Boy, so it's not in here, but it does have all of these, all of the inserts, the free official player's guide inside, the trainer's guide, which I love. It's so cool. And, you know, just your Game Boy consumer information packet. It's crazy. Like, I am so happy that I got this, because I never expected it, and I never, like, asked to have an original, like, a complete in-box version, but apparently she got it for a really good deal, and so she got me that. Blue was loose, because I think getting 2 complete in-box red and blue would be pretty ridiculous, and then she got me a Japanese copy of Gold. So we'll get to that in a second. But so talking about the game itself, I think it's one that it's really hard to go back to now. Red and Blue also was not my first experience with Kanto as a region. That'll come later, but I really do think that, you know, they're games to be respected. They're the very first ones. They literally took the world by storm. And if you look at the development history of Pokemon, it's wild. Like, there were so many issues with the development of Pokemon Red and Blue. And it's kind of amazing that they were able to still release it and have it take off as this giant phenomena as it did. Like, it's really crazy to see, like, the history of this series, and this is where it started. Technically, again, with Red and Green, not Red and Blue, but again, talking US releases, still pretty ridiculous. So I think the biggest thing for me is I'm not really gonna go back and play Red and Blue. There's not really a desire there when there are different ways to experience Kanto in a bit more of a modernized version that I have more nostalgia for, but it does deserve to be recognized as a pretty crazy good set of games. So I think, yeah, not gonna play Red and Blue in today's day and age, but I do think it is worth acknowledging and celebrating. That's what Pokemon Day is all about. So I'm gonna put Red and Blue in B, I think. I think that's a good spot. Again, really happy to have a whole box of Pokemon Red. Happy to have them. Happy to have played them and experienced them. But there were, yeah, they're not two that I would go back to in today's world. But they're good games. Now, next we have Pokemon Yellow, and I have fond memories of not playing this game, but experiencing others play this game. Of course, Pikachu is the big mascot of Pokemon, always has been. The fact that the original mascot of Pokemon was gonna be Clefairy is pretty crazy. Like, imagine all the Clefairy merch we could have had now. I think that's silly. But it was really cool, of course, to see Pikachu get his first game, and I think it was really silly because from what I can remember, Pikachu in this game was very sassy. Just kind of like how Pikachu in the anime was. It took a lot of inspiration, I think, from the anime, which I think was a strength for it. Especially because you had so many kids that might not have played Red and Blue and got their first Pokemon experience from the anime. Suddenly Pokemon Yellow comes out and they're like, I can be Ash Ketchum. And like, I think that really brought a lot more fans into it. I don't have any proof. This is entirely speculation, but that would be my thinking behind all of it. Now, the biggest thing is I didn't really play Pokemon Yellow. I don't have Pokemon Yellow, which is kind of sad. I've always wanted a copy of it, but it's one that I think often has issues with knockoff copies and stuff. A lot of the older ones do. Basically any Pokemon, you can find so many fake copies of these games, it's ridiculous. But I feel like Pokemon Yellow is one that, at least a long time ago when I was looking, it was really hard to find not a fake copy of Pokemon Yellow, so I never ended up owning it, but I have played enough of it, seeing it with friends, playing it with friends to have an opinion, and I mean, I think I'm gonna put it right with Red and Blue. I mean, the only thing is you have to have Pikachu, right? Like, that is, you're locked in with Pikachu. And for that reason, as much as I love Pikachu, I think that's why I would put it below Red and Blue as opposed to above Red and Blue. I don't like it when you're locked into having a specific starter. The only games that I think really did that well are like Colosseum and Gale of Darkness, because with it being an evolution, you at least have options there. And with Colosseum, I mean, you have Espeon and Umbreon, which are my two favorite evolutions, so that might just be my own bias right there, but at the same time, I'm not always the biggest fan of that, so I think I'm gonna keep it in B. There's not really any other changes between red and blue, at least from what I can think of off the top of my head, so they're kind of more like a 3-pack in my opinion. So next we have Pokemon Gold and Silver. I love Gen 2. I am a big Gen 2 fan. I love Gen 2 Pokemon. I love Johto as a region. I loved that part of the anime. I love Gold and Silver. However, I actually did not play the original Gold or Silver. I lean towards Silver. I don't know why. I like Lugia better, I think. I did not play Silver until much later on in life. I emulated it. I don't have a full copy of it, unfortunately. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. But I do have that Japanese copy of Gold, which I have not played. I have it though, which it's a prized possession because it was a gift from my grandma, and the fact that she ended up even getting a Japanese copy of Gold was bewildering, but I have it, so that's pretty exciting. But I love Gen 2 and the expansion that it did upon everything that Gen 1 did. Like, not only did it add new Pokemon, we had this cool new world. I think the characters were a little bit more fleshed out personality-wise in Gen 2, but it also, like, actually expanded upon, like, Gen 1 in general. And it added so many, like, series staples, like eggs and all of that, like baby Pokemon. I love baby Pokemon. I know they're silly, they're useless, but I love them. Just, it added so much. And the post-game in Kanto is something that I wish they would bring back in so many different ways in these more later games. I know a lot of people were thinking that we would get something like that in Scarlet and Violet, which I guess we kinda did with Blueberry Academy, because I think it's in Unova, but I didn't play it, so I don't know. We'll get to those games when we get to those games, but regardless, it's one of those things that I really think makes Gold and Silver a total standout in comparison to some of the other games, and I think it's one that is truly a classic to me. Like, I love Gen 2, and I think despite not growing up with this one, it is like, it's an A. It's an A for me. Yeah, it wasn't a childhood Pokemon, but I don't care. I love this game. And then Crystal, which Crystal I actually do have firsthand experience playing as a kid. I borrowed a copy of it from my friend, and I was so excited because Crystal was my first experience with Pokemon, ever. Like, ever. And here's the thing, so Crystal itself is a refinement of Gold and Silver. One big thing that it adds is the fact that you can play as a girl, and that was the first time that you could ever do that, which, as a kid who really wanted to live in a Pokemon world, that was a big draw for me. I was like, yes, I can do it! And like, you know, not playing as a girl doesn't bug me in games, but like, for something like this, I was like very self-insert for Pokemon, so I really appreciated that. The other thing with Crystal is it omitted a lot of Pokemon from Gold and Silver, which is weird. You could get the starters from Kanto in Gold and Silver, and you couldn't in Crystal, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a long time since I've played Pokemon Crystal, so if I get a few facts wrong, feel free to let me know in the comments nicely, but still let me know. But I really enjoyed Crystal, and again, having that be the one that I spent the most time with, it's important, but I do think in terms of, again, a third version and as a quote-unquote refinement, I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think there's a lot missing. There's a lot of the Johto Pokemon missing in Crystal as well. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put Crystal in B. I really do think that, I think Silver and Gold were better than Crystal. I really do. Again, like, there was just so much, and maybe it's because, like, Gold and Silver originated so many of those concepts, whereas Crystal, well, it was supposed to be a refinement, it didn't really add onto it. Maybe that's kind of why I feel that way? Maybe. I think that's why I feel that way. But it is also still Gen 2, right? So it's still pretty good. I do think Silver and Gold are better. The only reason that I wouldn't put Silver and Gold up into super favorite, honestly, is because it suffers from the same thing that Red and Blue do, where there's a more modern, better way to play it now, right? To play Gen 2, which we'll get to. Hopefully that wasn't too big of a spoiler, but I just think that A is perfect for Gold and Silver. We'll go high B for Crystal for it still being Gen 2, but missing a lot of the cool things the foundational things that made Gold and Silver like a step up. So I think we'll go with that for right now. Okay, Gen 3. If you've been around on the channel long enough, you know I am a Gen 3 nut. It is my favorite generation of Pokemon, 100%. And yes, I'm a little biased. These were not my first Pokemon games though. My first Pokemon games that I owned, well, I guess are technically a part of Gen 3. Yeah, they are a part of Gen 3. So yes, Gen 3 is my favorite generation of Pokemon game, and it was my first. But Ruby and Sapphire, I don't own. I actually do not have Ruby and Sapphire. I've played Sapphire before, but I don't own it. I don't own it. And I still think that Ruby and Sapphire are great games. Obviously, I love Gen 3 Pokemon. I love Gen 3 music. I love the location. Hoenn is another really great region that has so much variation in the world, like areas you see, which this is something too that Hoenn, I think there's just so much to see in Hoenn. It's so cool. And again, you have volcanoes, you have these beachy areas, but it's not always necessarily tropical, but I really love it. I really love it. And again, lots of cool things in Ruby and Sapphire. You have a much more complex story than you had up to this point, with the differing teams depending on what version you have, either Team Magma, Team Aqua, and yeah, it's just this really cool mix of things. Contests come into Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. I really love this series. So Ruby and Sapphire are gonna go in A. They're gonna go below Gold and Silver only because I think if you can see what's next, you know where it's going. Emerald is my favorite Pokemon game. I love Pokemon Emerald so much. This is when the third version of Pokemon became the refined version, in my opinion. Emerald had everything that Ruby and Sapphire had while combining the stories of the two. No longer do you just have Magma or Aqua, you have both teams making an appearance in the game to kind of have this more like finite story, with Rayquaza coming in and having a big impact of the story. You have both legendaries. Emerald just takes everything and combines it in the best possible way. Not only that, you have the Battle Frontier! You have the Battle Frontier! And yeah, it's just Emerald. I have so many good memories with Pokemon Emerald. I talked about it in a recent video. Oh, for games that I wish that I could play again. That's what I talked about it in, and it's so true. So if you want to hear more about my backstory with Pokemon Emerald, go watch that video after this video. But I love Pokemon Emerald. Again, I think it is truly a refinement of Ruby and Sapphire and just puts it in one beautiful little package. Definitely my favorite Pokemon game of all time. I know it's crazy to say it so early, but it really. And next we have Fire Red and Leaf Green. I had Leaf Green. That was my first Pokemon game that I ever owned. I think I was buying a present for a friend for their birthday, and we went to Toys R Us, and Leaf Green was on sale for some reason, like in a discount bin. So I convinced my mom to get it for me, and she did, and I played the heck out of Pokemon Leaf Green. Never owned Fire Red. Most of my friends had Fire Red. I was like the only person with Leaf Green, which I thought was funny. I adored Leaf Green, and this was really my first true experience with Kanto, which is why this one stands out to me a lot more. I think these two are definitely a refinement on Red and Blue. There's a lot more. You have the, what are they called? The Sevi Islands. You have the Sevi Islands, which I loved. I thought that was, again, going back into the world building and talking about regions and stuff, I feel like that added so much to the overall thing. Like, I don't know why. I think especially having come from like Silver and Gold, where you have this giant world, Hoenn felt a lot bigger than Kanto in my opinion, probably with the more diverse kind of areas. But I think having the Sevi Islands was a really good addition to Fire Red and Leaf Green because it made Kanto feel bigger, and it made just the entire Pokemon world feel bigger. So as like my first real true Pokemon experience, it was a really good one, and it definitely solidified my love of Kanto. Of course, being a Generation 3 game, it also included a lot of the Gen 3 things that we got used to, right? A lot of those quality of life updates, which it's weird to say quality of life updates from like 2000, like early 2000s, but at the same time, it really was. So I think I'm gonna put Fire Red and Leaf Green at the end of, I'm gonna put Fire Red and Leaf Green at the beginning of B. I know I just hyped it up. But Gen 1 is just not my favorite. It's just not my favorite. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my favorite. And I think this is Gen 1 in its best form, in my opinion. There are games later on that I like a little bit better, and I want to make sure that I don't front load it with a bunch of my favorites all in A. So I think looking at it, yeah, I think looking at it, it's gonna be at the beginning of B. Alright, Diamond and Pearl are next. This is where a lot of people my age really got into Pokemon, myself included. I love Diamond and Pearl. I have all three. I have Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. But Diamond is the one I played the absolute most. The absolute most. I got so into these games in every single possible way. I love Gen 4. In fact, Gen 4 is probably the only competitor for my #1 Pokemon generation. It's like Gen 3 is here, Gen 4 is like here. It's really, really, really close because I have so many memories playing these games with all of my friends. I didn't have a GBA link cable. I do now for some reason. I don't know where it came from, but I have one now. But I did not have one growing up. So being able to battle and trade with friends and family members with Diamond and Pearl, it was a brand new experience to me. And it just made it so much better. It's so funny. I have this old poster somewhere where it has somebody with, I don't know if anybody remembers this, the little microphone you could get for the DS. It was specifically a Nintendo microphone, so you could talk to your friends while you were trading. I never had that, but I remember the ads so well. And it was just like, it was a really exciting time, I think, for me, but I think for Pokemon fans in general. It expanded the Pokemon world even more because now you were trading with people all over, right? Like you had the GTS, you had like, oh, it was so good. Of course, contests were expanded upon. It was a good game. It was a good game. I really love Diamond and Pearl. I really do. But in comparison to Platinum, there were still a lot of things that got expanded on in the third version. It had a much closer relationship like Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald did than, say, Gold, Silver, and Crystal did. So personally, I am going to put Diamond and Pearl at the top of A. I adore those games. But when I think about what is a better game and what I like more, you know what? No, this is gonna be controversial. This is gonna be controversial. I'm putting Platinum, okay, I'm putting all of these in super favorite, but I'm putting Platinum below Diamond and Pearl. I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. I think Platinum is the better game. I really, really, really do think Platinum is the better game because, again, it expands on so much. The story is expanded upon. You have new characters. This third version, kind of like how Emerald does, it feels like an expansion of the world that you're already used to. And there's just a lot more you can do in Platinum. But when it comes to personal preference, I love Pokemon Diamond. I really do. If I were to play one of these three games today, I would play Platinum. I would play Platinum, but for nostalgia's sake and the fact that this is my reason, and like, Diamond, I love Diamond, so I am gonna put that above Platinum. But Platinum, again, is a phenomenal, phenomenal game. I remember when Platinum came out, I got like, I don't know if it was, not the collector's edition, but I got a bunch of bonuses with it, where I have a little statue, you can't see it up there, but it's up there. It's a little Giratina statue, but I also got this case that had Giratina and Shaymin on it. I don't know where that went. I wish I knew because it's a really cute case. I might have to rebuy it at some point in time, but just a really, really, really cool thing. So yeah, just good memories of that generation. Same deal, I was really into the anime at that time. Same thing with Hoenn too, but like, something about Diamond and Pearl was just so special. This was also the time where, I know we're not talking about spin-offs, but I think it's important to mention, where I think some of the best Pokemon spin-offs were coming out for me. Ranger, the better Mystery Dungeon games, like, I loved this time of Pokemon. So yeah, I know I said Gen 3 is my favorite. It is. I think Emerald still kind of tops these two for me, but at the same time, like, those, I love them. I love them so, 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 so much. Now we get to the other game of Gen 4, because now we're at the point where generations are not just having their new games, but their remakes as well. Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Yeah. I think a lot of people saw this coming. I think a lot of people saw this coming. I have Soul Silver. I do not have Heart Gold. I still have my big box for Soul Silver though, which is pretty cool. I did not get the statue with this one. I was a little too late on the draw, but still happy to have it. This is the refinement of Gold and Silver that I think we all wanted. And again, It takes everything I love about that generation and just makes it so much better. It makes it so much better. And again, easy to play because now you're on DS. It has all the quality of life updates. It makes use of the DS functionality. It's so clean and so good. I love the animations. I love the Pokemon. But it also maintains everything from the originals as well. Well, maybe not everything, but like the important stuff, like the post game, all of this stuff. There is so much good in Heart Gold and Soul Silver that it absolutely deserves to be top of the charts. Super phenomenal game. It takes one of my favorite generations and brings it up to date with all of the things that I love about that era of Pokemon. So definitely a super favorite. Now, Black and White I have an interesting story with. So I did not like Pokemon Black and White at first, which now I think is an atrocity because these are phenomenal games. Black and White are wonderful, like absolutely wonderful. I didn't give them as much of a chance as I should have when they first came out. I played a good amount of Black, but I really lost interest. And I think part of it too was I was getting into my young teens, and while I was still playing games, I was a part of a friend group that weren't gamers, so it was really hard to like, you know, talk about Pokemon with people and stuff. I was very alone, which was fine because I still love all those people. Not everybody's gonna love games, but I do think that was a kind of discouraging part of that whole situation. So I wasn't really into Black and White. Having played it again later on, I can tell you these games are spectacular. They're absolutely spectacular. The story of Black and White is so good. Again, very well-defined characters that you don't see in a lot of Pokemon games. And it's funny because when you think about Red and Blue, like, yeah, you have your gym leaders, and they were probably the characters with the most amount of personality, were the gym leaders in the Elite Four, right? But when it came to, like, other characters, there wasn't much. Like, yeah, Gary, you knew he was a jerk, but that was about it. Whereas, like, with Black and White, you have your group of friends. I think this is kind of when we started going more from jerk rival to friend, and I think a lot of people really don't like that, but I think there's also positives to it as well, because there's different things that you can do with that kind of a dynamic, and I think Black and White really handled it well. It wasn't all just about the power of friendship. You saw these characters that had struggles and hardships throughout their entire journey and change as they went through this journey, which you can't really say about a lot of other Pokemon games. And I think that was a really welcome addition to the overarching Pokemon sphere of things. But yeah, I couldn't get into it when I first played it. In fact, I really think I should play it again, but I'm gonna put Black and White in A. It's probably an S tier game. Like, it probably really, really is, but I wanna give it a fair shot again. So maybe we'll get a remake. I feel like they're not gonna remake it because there were some pretty dark topics in there, but like maybe they will. I don't know. But then that brings us to Black and White 2. Guess what? I have this have not played section. This is for this game specifically. I own White 2, I think. No, I got that backwards. I have Pokemon White, but I have Pokemon Black 2. That's what I have. I couldn't remember. This DS game was unopened for probably like 10 years. I was so not into Black and White that I got the game. I got Black 2 and I never played it. I never played it. It's embarrassing. I've watched playthroughs of it and I've seen other people play it and I know it's spectacular. I love the idea that it's a genuine sequel, right? It's not just a third version that's like maybe improved on some of the other things. It is a genuine sequel, kind of how Gold and Silver were supposed to be to Red and Blue, really. Because you see like the developments in Kanto in Gold and Silver. Like, you see the developments in Unova in Pokemon Black and White too. And you have recurring characters, which I think is also such an important thing. It helps reestablish those characters as definite individuals in my mind. Like, you see Bianca all grown up, like, helping with research and stuff like that. I just think that's so cool. And I remember being kind of upset that we didn't get a Pokemon Gray version, and I don't know why. I think, like, sometimes as a Pokemon fan, we get wrapped up in what we think is going to happen and what we assume is going to happen, sometimes for the better or for the worse. And I think a lot of people were in that same boat where they were like, where's Pokemon Gray version? Why are we doing a third version? Why do I have to buy 2 new games? Kind of like that, which I can also understand, but I think for Black and White that had such a big story, I think having a sequel story just rounds it all up. right? So I'm very excited to delve into that at some point in time. It's on the backlog list. It will happen. It will happen. It's open now because I wanted to have the cartridge with the rest of my games, but yeah, it will get played, I promise. And now we get into the later half of Pokemon. Unfortunately, there's gonna be a lot more things in C and D, which again, a lot of it goes down to the generation that you were born in for Pokemon. But we're gonna start with Gen 6. We have X and Y, the first games on the 3DS. And I actually liked X and Y a pretty decent amount. I did not think they were bad games. I remember buying this game on release day. I have Y. Regardless, I really liked this new region being based off of France. I thought that was really cool. And I didn't mention this with Black and White, but that was the first generation where we weren't in a region based off of Japan. Here we're based off of France. It's just really cool, especially because there's so much you can do architecturally wise and just environmentally wise, so it was really cool, and I think the game did a really good job doing that. We also got fairy types in X and Y, which I love fairy types. I think they were a really cool thing. I'm not a competitive player, I'm very much so a casual Pokemon player, so it didn't really screw anything up competitively for me, but I really like fairy types. I think they're very, very cool. But unfortunately, X and Y just aren't that memorable at all. Like, the only thing that's super memorable to me is the music from X and Y, which I haven't said this, but like, I'm not even really talking about music from the Pokemon games, because that is one thing that's consistently been good throughout all of them, is the music. I don't think any of the mainline Pokemon games have had bad music, in my opinion. There might be a few less awesome, less recognizable tracks, and a few of them here and there, but when it comes to the music of Pokemon overall, that's something they've always been consistent with, so that's my opinions on that. I do want to do like a Pokemon town theme tier list, or like just a list at some point in time. Maybe not a tier list, because that would take forever, but talk about my favorite Pokemon town themes, because I think those are some of the most memorable, and I don't know. I want to do more music content, so if you have ideas, Pokemon or not, let me know. But yeah, X and Y, I only ever played once. I never really gave them a replay, and I don't really find a need to do a replay of X and Y. One thing I do like, though, that I forgot are the roller skates. I thought that was fun. I thought that was very cute. I'm gonna put X and Y, either low B or C. I'm gonna put it in C for right now, just to fill out the tier list a little bit. I don't think they're bad games. I really, really don't. I just think, yeah, they're not as memorable as some of the others. But I enjoyed, I don't know, I enjoyed X and Y more than I enjoyed Pokemon Yellow. So, you know what? This is what we're gonna do. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do that. Or no, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do this. And we'll go with that and see what I feel like played. Never mind. No, I'm doing that. I think this makes more sense, honestly, which is a little weird, right? Because again, I was hyping the first gen, and I think it's something to acknowledge. C does not necessarily mean it's a bad category, but I just think when I think about the enjoyment that I think I had more enjoyment with X and Y, which is crazy to say, than I did Red, Blue, and Yellow. That, yeah, okay, we're going with that. We're going with that. Okay. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, I think these were phenomenal remakes. The last good remakes we got of previous Pokemon games. I do wish they would have leaned more towards Emerald, but at the same time, I really think that Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were phenomenal remakes. They took everything that was good about the originals, upgraded it, added new stuff. So we didn't get the Emerald stuff, but we did get the Delta episode. So we still had Rayquaza interaction. We had Zinnia, who has one of the best themes of any like exclusive trainer. Oh, Zinnia's theme is so good. It's so good. And I thought that was pretty cool. Again, it really stuck true to the originals while adding a bunch of extra stuff. The Latios and Latias thing was really cool. I really, really, really enjoyed Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I would probably still go back and play the originals more, but I think it was a really good remake, so I'm gonna put it in A. Sun and Moon. So these are interesting ones for me. So, Pokemon Sun was actually, before I started recollecting for the 3DS, Pokemon Sun was the last 3DS game I ever got. Obviously, I've expanded my collection since then, but when 3DS games were still actively coming out, I was out of Pokemon at that point in time. I really, really, really was. I was also in college, didn't have a lot of disposable income, didn't have a lot of time. I was buying amiibos, as I mentioned in my amiibo collection video. So I just was not spending a lot of time with this. I did play Pokemon Sun all the way to the end. It was fine. It was fine. I appreciate that they tried to do something different. I really, really do. I think at that point, like, you know, they didn't have a ton to lose with trying to do something different, and I think X and Y suffered from being almost too samey in comparison to everything else, and especially following up Black and White. Like, X and Y, while I enjoyed it, it was definitely like meh, you know? It was like there wasn't a ton of crazy new revelations that we had in X and Y. Doesn't mean there wasn't good things. I already talked about the good things, but I think with Sun and Moon they were really looking to go in a different direction, and I think they did. I really, really feel like they did. And personally, I didn't really like it all that much. This kind of also sets the tone for the more modern Pokemon games as well, and the differences that they tried to do to the gyms. And I don't know. I don't think it was a bad game. I liked the story. I liked the characters. Not as much as I liked the characters in Black and White, to be honest, but they were, again, very well defined, but there were also a lot of them. And this is something I didn't mention with X and Y. Oh, man, I might be moving X and Y back down to C. I think X and Y's characters... Yeah, I'm moving it back to C. I'm moving it back to C. X and Y's characters were there was a lot of them, and none of them were remarkable in any way. In any way, in my opinion. Like, that was where you had your group of friends, and it was all about friendships. Great! I love friendship! And, like, it was kind of boring. I never felt like there was any real competition there at all. So, they didn't stand out to me. And again, following up from Black and White, it was just really hard to have these kind of more complex characters, and then these characters that were a lot more, like, one-dimensional. So it felt a little bit of a downgrade. I think Sun and Moon had better characters, but I think there were too many of them. I'm gonna retract that statement only kind of. I like when your gym leaders in a Pokemon game, or like the characters of authority, are more than just gym leaders. I like when you can see them in their everyday life doing things and interacting, and because there's not really a gym system in Sun and Moon, it almost allows you to see more of these characters in a different way, which was pretty cool, right? So, like, I do appreciate that. It made them stand out a lot more, they had a lot more personality, and this was also a big change in the anime as well. The anime was totally different during the Sun and Moon days than it was when you had the, whatever the last series was. I watched quite a bit of that. I did not watch a lot of Sun and Moon because I really did not like the animation. I really did. But, like, it was a total change. Rather than having, like, Ash's one or two friends, you had a huge cast of characters, and I think they were going to school together or something like that. I don't remember. But it was very different, and, like, it was cool that Sun and Moon set the path for that, but in terms of a Pokemon game that I liked, I would never go back and play Sun and Moon. I just wouldn't. There was not enough to keep me in while I was playing it, and there's not enough to bring me back to play it again. I don't think it's a bad game. It's definitely not the worst game on this list, but so it's at the bottom of C for me. And then, another have not played, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I don't own either of these. I'm looking to add it to my collection just so I can have the complete Pokemon set for the 3DS, I guess. Like, I mean, not the complete, like, both versions, but just so I have one representation on every single one. With Black 2 and White 2, it expanded on the story. With Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, I don't know if it does that. I literally don't know anything about Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I never had the interest to look into it, and so I never did. I just never did. So, what are your thoughts on Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? Are they good? Are they not worth it? I don't know. Once I find a cheap copy of either one, I'm gonna add it to the collection just for the sake of having it in my 3DS collection. I don't know if I'll ever play it, to be honest. I have no desire to go back to that part of the world of Pokemon, which sucks because I love the difference in region. And that's one thing, like, I love that Sun and Moon picked Hawaii as their basis for the region because it gets us out of Europe, it gets us out of the continental US, which between those two, like, yeah, there are differences in architecture and stuff and, like, some things, but, like, there's not a huge difference. So it's really cool to have somewhere that is not Japan, not either one of those places, very distinctly Pacific island, which is really cool. I admire it, but it's not my favorite. All right, hey you, Pikachu and Eevee. So I'm a sucker for Eevee, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Eevee is one of my favorite Pokemon. Umbreon's my ultimate favorite Pokemon, but, you know, to get an Umbreon, you need an Eevee. So I was excited to have an Eevee-based game. And I actually don't mind Let's Go as much as I think some other people do. Is it the ultimate way to play Kanto? No. I really dislike that it basically forces you to use motion controls all for the sake of that game, because that's the whole thing. And I understand this is a game that truly is more directed towards children. And I know Pokemon fans don't like to hear that, right? Because it's like, we grew up with the series, like they should know. But like, this game was more for younger and inexperienced Pokemon players to kind of show them the ropes while also being interactive, which I think for the sake of that, that's a really good idea. Like, kids like to be moving, they like to be doing things. And I think having them throw the Pokeball is a really cool way to do that, actually. I wish there was just an option to not have to do that. I didn't mind these games, I really didn't. But once I was done, I had no desire to do any of the post-game. I was just like, beat it, put it back on the shelf. I do like that they didn't just make it like Eevee and Pikachu with just their normal moves, because I have no idea how that would have worked. I like that they made your Eevee a little bit special by being able to get moves from all the different evolutions since you can evolve. I do think it's better than Pokemon Yellow. Not as good as the originals, but I do think I'm gonna put it above Yellow. I feel bad for Pokemon Yellow, but I just don't have strong ties to it. And I love Pikachu, don't get me wrong, and I think it's really cute. Oh, but see, this looks wrong. It looks wrong to put Let's Go above Sun and Moon, but actually, you know what? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I'm gonna keep Sun and Moon exactly where it is. If you're gonna be locked into one Pokemon, Pikachu and Eevee is better than just Pikachu, like Yellow Edition. So we're gonna go with that. It does look weird to have Sun and Moon below Let's Go Pikachu, but I don't know. I did have a better time playing Let's Go Eevee than I did Sun and Moon, so I guess that's where we're going. Sword and Shield. Yeah, okay. I don't think this is a surprise. I think we're very much so into the bottom of the barrel of Pokemon, and which is sad. It's really sad for me to say that, because I want the modern games to be good. I wish my top picks weren't the ones I grew up with. You know, I wish the newer games were an improvement, but they're just not. Sword and Shield, however, I do have a lot of really good memories playing in college with friends. It is still a D tier, and I will explain why, but I want to talk about the positives first. I had never felt more connected playing a Pokemon game with friends than I did until Sword and Shield. Like, I mean, since the Diamond and Pearl eras, I was very much so on my own, or maybe with one or two other people with Pokemon. Once Sword and Shield dropped, all of my friends were playing it, and it felt so nice. Like, a lot of my friends at that point in time were getting their Switches in anticipation for Animal Crossing, which, you know, this was late 2019, so good on them for that foresight, because they weren't gonna be around for very much longer. But we had a group. Oh, I remember it. We had a Pokemon Day party where we watched the re-release of the first movie, which wasn't good. But we would get together for max raid battles, and like, we'd play together, like sitting next to each other. It was just a really good experience, and like, that is something that I really appreciate about Sword and Shield. I also think Sword and Shield's DLC was pretty good. I really enjoyed the Isle of Armor and the Isle of other things, I don't remember. I really enjoyed the DLC though. I think it expanded the world, it expanded the characters a little bit, we got to see a little bit more, and it had an actual like story and like experience. One of the biggest things I think a lot of people were disappointed in with Sword and Shield was the fact that it wasn't a fully open world game, like kind of how it showed itself was almost gonna be. It was the wild area, right? And so like, you had that, and that was fine, except for the numerous technical issues with that area. But I think everybody wanted the game to be more like that, and it wasn't, you know, and it just wasn't. And I get it, you know. It also was easy. It was such an easy game. This goes back to what I was saying about how I love gym leaders when they're more than just gym leaders, which we did get in Sword and Shield, but at the same time, we also got non-traditional gym battles in the form of extra little things that you had to do. And this continued into Scarlet and Violet, and I get they have to switch it up. They do, but when they're just pointless time wasters, like how they were in Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, it just wasn't good. It just wasn't good. It was a waste of my time. At least the one thing I will say about the ones in Sword and Shield is they actually made sense, I think, which I'm trying not to talk too much about Scarlet and Violet right now, but I think because we're at the bottom of the barrel, it's hard to not compare the two. Yeah, I think they made a little bit more sense for Sword and Shield. I also just really enjoyed the gym leaders of Sword and Shield. I thought they were cool, I thought they were interesting, and I wish we saw them more like actual human beings. So that's one downside. And again, technical issues aside, I'm not somebody who really like points at technical issues in games and is like, this makes this a bad game. But the one thing I will say about Pokemon and its like continuing factor of this is it really has like, it's been bad. It's been bad. And Sword and Shield was where it really started to be obvious. Like, I think that's really when a lot of the conversations around crunch began and how we shouldn't be getting a new game like this every single year. And I definitely agree with that. So I'll be interested. Again, this is filmed before the Pokemon Present, so I don't know what's gonna be said. Maybe they'll take a year off. But yeah, so Sword and Shield, it is going in D. I don't think it's a very good game, but I did have a good time with it. And those memories with like playing with friends, and again, max raid battles is a huge thing for me, a huge thing for me. It's definitely the better of, it's definitely gonna remain in the top of the D tier, in my opinion. All right, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, a disappointing remake. But I'm going to acknowledge this disappointment in a fact that I think a lot of Pokemon fans' expectations with this one were misplaced. I think pretty much everybody that was a fan of Gen 4 wanted a Platinum remake, but we were never going to get a Platinum remake. It was always going to be Diamond and Pearl, because that's how they do the remakes. They do it in the split versions. Again, probably to make more money, but at the same time, it's like they're remaking those original games. But the biggest thing with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is it didn't do what Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire did, which was add. It was a very, I don't even want to say accurate remake of Diamond and Pearl, because there were still a lot of things that were changed that had to be changed coming from the DS, but it just was not good. Even with that expectation that should not have been a part of it, it was not a good remake. I'm not saying I didn't have fun. I enjoyed revisiting that world, but the fact of the matter is, and here's the thing, I actually enjoyed the chibi art style. I did not have a problem with that, especially not as much as other people did. It would have been really cool to see it fully realized in a big world 100%. Even like with the Let's Go style, I would have been really happy with that, but at the same time, that didn't bug me. What bugged me was the fact that the game was still so buggy, even with like no expectation of an open world. That is really where the cracks started to show. It also took out the underground, which was like the best. It didn't take it out, but it drastically changed it. Like secret bases, you could not customize secret bases anymore, which was a crime. It was a crime. I loved secret bases, especially in Diamond and Pearl, because it was always a cool thing to go visit your friend's secret base, where it's like now you get statues and that's about it. I know, a very minuscule like complaint, but still, I was still mad. I was still very mad about it. I just was really disappointed with these ones, especially being remakes of some of my favorite Pokemon games. It was disappointing, even if like the Platinum expectation was not, again, should not have happened, because we had no reason to expect that they were going to remake Platinum, right? I wish it were treated with a little more care. Time to rank this. This is going below Sword and Shield, which is crazy. It's crazy to me that it's going below Sword and Shield. But it is, because I could at least play Sword and Shield and have a good time with friends. With BDSP, I played it by myself in like November, and it was just meh. It was just meh. I felt like I was playing it more as a formality, which is not a good thing to feel when you're playing a video game. So that's where we're at. Again, I had fun with it. I'm not, D tier does not mean I didn't have fun with these games. But at the same time, it's not my favorite, and I don't think it was a very good remake. Now, what BDSP did do though, which I will be forever grateful for, it got me extremely excited for Legends Arceus. I've talked about this game on the channel before. I love this game, and the fact that it's in this main series, like, tier list is interesting, because is it a main series or is it a spin-off? Is it a spin-off main series? That's more what I'm leaning towards, but I still wanted it to be on this list because I think it's important to talk about. I loved Arceus, Arceus, whatever you want to call it. I've always said Arceus, so whatever. I've always wanted to see a Pokemon environment that we're familiar with, but it's totally changed. Same kind of deal. That's why I loved Platinum so much, was because it was Sinnoh, but different. This, taking it to the past, I think is a great idea. I think it's a great idea. And here's where I can put aside the bugginess. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the catching mechanics. I enjoyed the overall changes that were made to Arceus. I love this game. I think it's really, really, really good. And it goes an A. Like, I really enjoy it a lot. And I know it's not the best. It's not the best game. But I loved playing this game. This was the most into a Pokemon game I had been in a really, really, really long time. Like, really, really, really long time. It was so enjoyable talking to friends about things that they discovered, all the shiny Pokemon that they got. And I know there was the complaint that people were like, it made shiny hunting way too easy. Whatever. It's different, you know? It's different than doing it in a mainline game. So I really, really enjoyed Arceus. Yeah, there was just a lot to like. I wish we could have gotten DLC with it. I really do, because I think DLC for Arceus would have been something that was worth it to me. What that DLC would have been, I don't totally know, but I wish we would have gotten it. I really, really do. And I really hope we get another Legends game, because I think they're so interesting. They're so interesting, and there's so much you can do. Again, we're getting to the point with Pokemon where story is becoming an expectation, which, for better or for worse, right? I think Legends is a really good shoot off of the main series to explore storytelling and like having a more, I don't know, a Pokemon game that feels like a mainline Pokemon game, but it's not focused on collecting gym badges. And I think it's a really, really cool asset for Pokemon, like, to have, you know, is to have a game to be a little bit more experimental. And yeah, I really, really like Arceus. And that brings us to Scarlet and Violet. You already all know where this is going, and here's the thing. I have talked about Scarlet and Violet on the channel before. I have Violet. I wouldn't say I've been a defender of Scarlet and Violet, but I definitely am not a hater of Scarlet and Violet, but I do think we need to look at this game critically. So it is at the bottom of D for me. I really, as much fun as I had with it, because I had a blast with Violet. I really, really, really did. I cannot, in good conscience, rank it above anything else. I really just can't. I mean, again, I usually don't point out bugs and stuff in games. This game was a buggy mess. Like, it was ridiculous. And like, it didn't affect my ability to have fun with the game like it did for other people, which for that I'm grateful. But the fact that every single person that I talked to had such a different experience with playing and running this game is not a good thing. It's not a good thing where some person, like one person should be having a good experience, no bugs, no crashes, when another person has like several. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how this should be coming from an extremely rich company. It's just not how that should work. But positives in Scarlet and Violet, I do think the idea of an open world with Pokemon will work. I really, really, really do. Is it something I necessarily want? I still don't know. I still don't know, because Scarlet and Violet was not the best introduction, but it did make me think that it's possible, that it can really work and be a really good experience. I also really enjoyed the Pokemon of Scarlet and Violet. I think they made some really nice additions, which I haven't really been talking about the Pokemon per each generation, but I will say with Scarlet and Violet, that was the most excited I had been for starters since Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon, one big plus, it does have one of my favorite sets of starters of all time. Of all time. I love all three of them. But Scarlet and Violet was kind of like the next one where I was like, I like all of these guys. Like, I really, really do. There are later evolutions, not so much, but for starter evolutions, absolutely. I thought they were all really, really cool. And just other really good additions. Paldean Wooper is great. Clodsire, a big fan. Other good things. I really liked the story of Scarlet and Violet. I really did. I thought it was a huge upgrade from Sword and Shield, with Sword and Shield being a lot more simplistic until you got the DLC, where Scarlet and Violet, you had characters that developed with you as you progressed along these certain quest lines, which I thought was great. And I thought that was a cool way to really have the player choose what order they want to do things in. And I really appreciate that, while still having the same kind of progress that you would in a normal Pokemon game. And again, you see the growth within characters like Arven, who is my personal favorite of all of those stories, I think is a really powerful character with a really cool story. So I really appreciated that. And having at the end, so this is a little bit of a spoiler, but not gonna get too much into it. At the end, you have all of those paths kind of converge, and now you have this group of friends going on this big final adventure, and I think that's a really, really cool way to do it. The game does not end when you beat the Elite Four. you have other things you can do. There's still more out there to explore, and I think that was a really good way to handle that. I really do. However, my other issues. The Team Star raids were terribly easy. The gym battles were... I thought level-wise they were alright. I also, same kind of deal with Sword and Shield, I don't like that you have to do a little activity before you can get to the gym battle, especially because the ones in Scarlet and Violet felt like the most pointless time wasters of all time. Rolling an olive. Finding Sunflora, that was probably the most engaging one. Doing ESP training. Myself and any other person that I watched do that ESP thing, nobody understood what it meant. Like, nobody understood what it was supposed to be at first, which is not good. It just felt like a time waster. And I don't know. If you're gonna have side quests, fine. Absolutely fine. Like, you have to do something before you get to the gym. Fine, but don't make it a dumb activity. Like, I thought that was really not good. And it dragged on because I'm like, I just want to get to the battle. Like, let me do that. In fact, the only other one that I kind of appreciated was the Larry one, and it's just because Larry's was like, it felt more side questy. So, I don't know. One positive, I like the gym leaders. The gym leaders are really interesting. I thought we got a really good pool of characters, not just the gym leaders, but also the professors at the academy. I thought those were really, really cool characters. Very neat to have them as a part of this whole thing, and very fleshed out. All personalities, they have connections with one another, which is something I like to see. At the same time, it's like Scarlet and Violet felt like it was the most connected Pokemon has ever been within its own contained region, while also feeling like the most disjunct at the same time. I had a good time with it. I did not buy the DLC because I don't think it's worth it. I think if they would have made more of an effort to update the game so it didn't crash for several people, / just make it better, then I would buy it. But like, there has been nothing that I've seen of the DLC to make it worth my time and money. Like, I have no desire to put more time into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I have no desire to spend, what, the $40? $30 or $40, however much it is, to spend more time in that game, which is sad. It's really sad because I had high hopes. I think a lot of the initial things we saw were pretty good, but the fact of the matter is, after that initial thing, we never saw anything that got better. So, yeah, I just can't put it above anything else. There we have it! I hate to end that on a sad note, but at the same time, that's where we're at. I'm sure a lot of you could probably have guessed what a lot of my choices were going to be based off of, again, my age, the games I'm nostalgic for, and all of that. But I hope my reasons were enough, you know, to explain why some were higher than others. I'm pretty happy looking at this list. I really do think this is about where we're at. It still feels weird to have Sun and Moon underneath Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but again, that's what we're going with. That's what we're going with. So I'm pretty happy with this list. So let me know your favorite Pokemon games and let me know what you think about my list. Again, subjective. Remember, it's subjective. I'm a little worried. I'm more worried about this tier list than I have any other tier list because it's Pokemon and I know how vicious Pokemon fans can get. But, you know, hopefully I don't get punched in the face. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and maybe subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'd super appreciate it. We do a lot of different Nintendo gaming content on the channel. And yeah, it's just a really, really good time. And I was really excited to do this one. This was a very, very, very fun one to do. And I can't wait to hear your Pokemon opinions as well. Happy Pokemon Day, my dear friends, and I will see you in the next video. Probably back on the ground where I'm more comfortable and know where to stare at the camera. Goodbye!